Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first Hustings for District 3 and 4. We have 10 candidates with us this evening who have already drawn lots in terms of their seats, and their seats will be the order in which they make their introductory speeches and then answer questions. After their speeches, I will be opening the floor to questions, and then each candidate will have an opportunity to answer those questions. So thank you all for coming this evening. I hope you enjoy it. And without any further ado, Francesca Iyer to make her opening speech.
Hi. My name is Francesca Iyer. I'm 30 years old. I'm probably the most conspicuously local candidate here. I grew up just down the road in First Tower and I attended this very primary school as a child. One of my main reasons for standing, I'm 30 years old and I believe that there aren't enough voices in the Assembly from people of my generation. I think that my generation, the issues that my generation are facing are ones which should have been addressed by politicians many years ago, and we're sort of suffering the ill effects of that now. These are things like, words like diversification, housing crisis, migration controls. These have been thrown around for as long as I've been alive, repeated ad nauseum, and yet I cannot think of a single concrete policy that's been undertaken in the last 10 years to address any of these. So I feel that I'm standing because I feel that having borne the brunt of that as a young person, that perhaps I could engage in a bit more long-term thinking, perhaps, and also because there are other issues that I'm obviously passionate about, such as increased respite care for the disabled adults in particular and their families, because they don't receive enough, or any at all, in fact, if their child is over the age of 18. I'm also standing for the removal of GST from food. I'm standing for a fair deal for our nurses, and also for an increase in the stamp duty allowance for first-time buyers. I'm trying to be as concrete as possible in my pledges because I don't want to promise everything to everybody and then get in and do nothing. I'd like to have a mandate if I am successful in this election, so I have concrete policies that I can pursue. Also, I've also pledged bolder decision-making and greater transparency in the states, as I feel that is something that is sorely lacking. I think there's almost an idea in the government at the moment, there's almost a reluctance to take any decision which might prove, unless it is universally popular. I feel that's not the business of government necessarily. I feel that the business of government is to make decisions which are in the public interest, such as providing us with a new hospital, one of many examples, without unnecessary delay and without incurring any further unnecessary expense. So if I'm elected, I hope to be held to account for the promises I have made. And that's it. Please consider voting for Francesca Iyer on the 27th of February.
Thank you. Guy Defay.
Hello, I'm Guy Defay. I have an honours degree in law, but I moved into journalism because I'm not a great supporter of daylight robbery. I started at Channel Television and then went on to work in London, which included time as macroeconomics reporter for CNBC Business News. But primarily I worked on the ITN World News, which at the time was the world's most highly acclaimed international news program with 150 million viewers across the planet. I say acclaimed because we know we were watched by virtually all the foreign correspondents in Washington, and indeed by President Gorbachev, who did insist when asked for an interview by News at 10 that he'd agree to it, as long as it was paid as well on the ITN World News. And I was finally working for Euronews in Lyon, where my French speaking came in handy, when I decided it was time to come back to Jersey and register politically my objections to ministerial government. By some stroke of irony, before I knew what was going on, I'd lost that particular vote, but ended up being a minister. I'm standing here because I believe that, firstly, I have 6 years of already representing this district, and I think experience is going to count coming in late to the Assembly on a by-election. And I do believe that Jersey is at something of a crossroads. I think you're all beginning to understand the pressures on accommodation and the numbers of people living this island. And I think that when the island plan comes around, which it's likely to do in the next couple of years, we're going to see a major showdown between building development and keeping the landscape that we're familiar with. I'm actually old enough to remember when the Le Marais blocks were not there. I can remember an enormous number of fields that are now built on. And I don't want to see this island going the same way. It is somewhat interesting that last year's scrutiny panel warned that unless immigration and population growth was dealt with, we might have to build the equivalent of 230 Le Marais-style blocks. Well, I just want to make sure that we can try and head things off at the pass before Jersey turns into something that we no longer recognise. I also want to change the measures, particularly for those in Andean states housing. I think having percentages of market rate is wrong. We should de-link states rentals from the market. We own all the properties and people should get fair rents based on what it actually costs. Thank you.
Nicola Cornu.
Good evening. My name is Nicola Cornu, and some of you might think that this election is about electing the parish dog catcher, because some of them are playing at a very low key, and they're quite happy that this should be a low turnout election. I'm not. I'm out every night, knocking doors, voter registration forms in hand, and I'm registering people and trying to persuade them to overcome that 70% voter abstention, that politicians do care and that they can make a difference. Nor is it a beauty competition, because I would have lost at the outset. It's a serious and important election. Whoever is elected is going to be a deputy deciding policy and, for example, the location of the hospital. I've got an invitation to make to you. I'd like you to all attend, and that includes the candidates here, at the demonstration on Saturday in Howard Davis Park. Starts at 10, kick-off at 10:30. It's marching in support of nurses, civil servants, and teachers who are making wage demands. Simple cost of living. I will have with me a notebook, and I will be noting in that notebook which candidates have attended and which have not, and I'll be reporting back at the next Hustings, because it's important that you should know which side are they on, because when they knock on your door, they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear. And the great claim is, they tell you one thing and they do another. I don't. I do what it says on the tin. I represent the interest of working people, of pensioners, the most vulnerable. This is an island run for the rich and the powerful. I know it. When I exposed the election expenses scandal, it was evident. The political class got their get-out-of-jail-free card. You saw that 25 candidates in the May election and 30 states members can't fill in electoral register form and get it in on time. It's a lack of respect for you. And the role of the Attorney General was equally inept. He knew full well there were at least another 30 persons who he could have prosecuted, but he picked out 3 and he persecuted them. His hallmark is persecution. I think I have a vision of a different Jersey, a modernised Jersey, a democratic Jersey, not an authoritarian Jersey, which is the one that we seem to have at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Andrea Mallet.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Andrea Mallet. I am Jersey-born, and I've lived in St Helier for over 30 years, and I'm currently working in the legal and finance industries and have done for the past 23 years. I've travelled extensively working with a number of overseas school building projects in some of the world's poorest regions. And this led me to become an event management business owner in Jersey, focusing on fundraising for local charities and the creation of community events. And this includes a new beach festival, a free event, ensuring that it's affordable and accessible for all, created by the community for the community. In recent years, I campaigned to save the protected green space at the Colette, ensuring our local voice was heard and canvassing all the sitting states members, outlining why the development would have a detrimental impact on our environment. Currently, I'm campaigning for the regeneration of Harvey Parr. I'm a member of the Regeneration Steering Group as a driving force on behalf of the residents who want to see St Helier improved for the betterment of the community, as I'm sure you do as well. I'm standing for election because I have a passion to help and stand up for others, and with my skills and experience will work constructively with others on all the issues, and because of this, I'm ready to hit the ground running from day one. If ever there was an example of failure to deliver and listen to islanders, it's the Future Hospital. And it's imperative we get this right, consult the right people, pick the right site with the right leadership. But for us, it's important that we take the St Helier residents' concerns on board. We shall see what the States Assembly vote next week happens with great interest, I'm sure. Jersey also has to have a balanced immigration policy. Why has this not been achieved? I want answers, and I know you do as well. Let's have facts and solutions. I welcome everybody to Jersey who can make a positive contribution to our island, but we've got to be realistic about the numbers. I'm also aware of your other concerns, because they are mine as well. A fairer taxation system, lack of affordable housing and social housing, education, Brexit, the environment. I've worked with many in the parish on a number of projects, which have given me the depth of understanding and the reality of island life in 2019 that matches my ability to represent you and give you a voice when it's most needed. St Helier has so much potential. You, our community, is our biggest asset, and when we work together, are listened to and engaged, positive change can happen. That's why I'm here, to provide a fresh and motivated approach, bringing people together to find common sense solutions that work for all. This is our district, our island, and our voice. Please consider me for your vote on Wednesday, the 27th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay Feltham.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Feltham and I'm standing for Deputy in St Helier number 3 and 4 district, as I want to support the delivery of positive change for the benefit of the island. I am standing as a Reform Jersey candidate, as I know that we can deliver more working together as a team. I live in the district at Westmount, and I have previously lived in the district at Montalabé and Rouge-Bouillon. I will fight for a fair deal for St Helier. We need strong representation, and I will support electoral reform to achieve equal-sized constituencies. I will also support a democratic council for St Helier. I am an experienced public servant. I currently work for the States of Jersey, and I have previously worked for the state government of Western Australia. Staff morale within our public services is at an all-time low. The people providing our essential services are feeling undervalued and disrespected. The current pace of change is putting vital public services at risk. If elected, one of my priorities will be to ensure that the changes being made are fit for purpose, will deliver the best value for islanders, and recognise the specialist expertise of local people. The current pay dispute requires urgent resolution. The proposition brought by Deputy Southern to resolve the issue lost by just one vote. I will work alongside my Reform Jersey colleagues and members across the chamber to bring this proposition back to the States Assembly for debate, when all members are present to vote and without backroom interference from the CEO. There is also a lot of pressure on working families. As an elected member of the States, I would support policies that will make day-to-day life easier for families. These include developing a fair rent regulation system, improving provisions for parental leave, ensuring that schools are well funded and that quality childcare is available, increasing the minimum wage, and reducing the cost of GP consultations for those on low incomes. I will be able to work together with my Reform Jersey colleagues to deliver on these promises. We are all committed to working together towards achieving the 10 key pledges which form our contract with voters. A vote for me is a vote for a stronger team. Please consider giving me your vote on the 27th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. Geraint Jennings.
Bonsoir. Good evening. Bonsoir. Dobry wieczór. But if you'll allow me, I'll continue in English for you. It has been said that a politician is someone who will promise to build a bridge even where there's no river. We might say that a Jersey politician is someone who'll promise to build a hospital, a new sports centre, replace Fort Regent, a new concert and entertainment venue to replace Fort Regent, several thousand homes, and all on a St Helier Park. I think we need the proper balance, and we need people who will be the best choice to be a strong voice for St Helier. Now, I've been a member of the Roads Committee, our de facto council in St Helier, for many years, and since 2016, I've been Procureur du Bien Public, representing the financial and legal interests of the parish, overseeing the budget, helping to make difficult decisions about the prioritisation of services in order to serve the people, and also looking after our environment. The amenities, the spaces, the roads, the transport. So I'm someone who understands the everyday issues. I've been working with them, but I can move forward with your help into the States to be that strong voice for St Helier. We need to properly separate the powers so that St Helier has a proper elected body with the delegated, devolved powers from the states to deal with the everyday issues, so that states members can get the legislation through, can get the strategies implemented, and can do the necessary scrutiny to avoid waste, to improve effectiveness, and to ensure the island as a whole moves ahead. There are better solutions available through technology, better solutions for transport, for parking through automated parking systems. We can improve the use of existing car parks through dynamic pricing and technology. We'll be looking at digital solutions for so much in the future, but we'll also be looking at everyday historic values, looking after the environment and also looking after agriculture, because a lot of this district is in fact quite rural. We also need to look at transport in the wider sense, linking with Guernsey, linking with mainland Normandy and Brittany, and also preserving those links with the UK, which are so vital to the economy. So we're looking at the local situation, but also looking wider, building bridges across our seas, but also building what's necessary, but retaining the built environment as part of the historic heritage.
Thank you. John Baker.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm John Baker. You can measure a man by what he has done, not by what he promises to do. During my life, I've built a successful business and raised a fine family of 3 children, of whom I am immensely proud. I've worked tirelessly for the parish over many years, firstly as a rates assessor and then as chairman of the Rates Assessment Committee. I currently work with other good people on the Parish Roads Committee, Accounts Committee and Youth and Community Trust, of which I am a trustee and treasurer. I am active in community groups such as the West of Town Community Association, where I've recently arranged a £60,000 worth of funding for new playground equipment at People's Park and the planting of some 10,000 spring bulbs. As chairman of the Jersey Action Group, I continually challenge bad decisions by government, most recently the hospital site decision, which I have become heavily involved in, having attended both planning inquiries and all of the future hospital neighbourhood forums, where I've been looking after the interests of local residents. The Parish Roads Committee is continually striving to improve the safety and effectiveness of our roads, and we have many safety incentives on the go, including areas of First Tower, Le Poucalet, St John's Road and Le Clovaz. The Parish Accounts Committee ensures your money is spent wisely. We're currently working on 2 suggestions of mine, one which will save the parish around £100,000 per annum in rates collection, and another idea is for a new source of income of some £250,000 per annum. With my fellow trustees on the Youth and Community Trust, we are currently looking at 3 separate sites in St Helier where we can hopefully create community centres. We already have a commitment from government to spend £5 million on such projects. On environmental issues, I founded local charity Earth Project Jersey to act as an umbrella organisation to bring environmental groups together and secure funding for local projects. Earth Project Jersey and its members have collaborated with SOS Jersey to bring the truth to the public about the sea lettuce problem, an ongoing issue we will continue to address. We are currently working with beekeepers and government on the problem of the Asian hornet invasion. I could go on, but I think you have the measure of the man. I believe that the time is now right for me to be able to serve you more effectively as a deputy in the States. Please vote for me, John Baker, so I can continue to work on your behalf. Thank you.
Gordon Troy.
Hi, I'm Jersey-born Gordon George Troy. My family first came to Jersey from Ireland after the famine in 1851. Apparently it was a really bad spud season there. So I'm proud to say my family have produced 9 States members in the last 60 years, and I believe I'm your best choice for deputy. Why? Because with me it's people first. I care about people and their problems. Successive governments have failed to listen to the people's wishes. The last 20 years has seen reckless capital spending by the states. Population controls have been totally ignored. Pensioners struggle to make ends meet. Taxes have increased. Social housing rents are too high. Young families can't get on the housing ladder, and austerity measures are causing strikes within the civil service. Many people are disappointed, unhappy, and struggling because the states are not listening to the public and their need. States capital spending is removing funds needed to help the community. And a combination of unnecessary capital spending plus financial wastage and changes on our tax system has financially squeezed the Jersey public and small businesses, bringing hardship in many cases. Inflationary GST, now 5%, has effectively become a 5% pay cut to the island's population, extracting a staggering £80 to £90 million a year from the economy. Jersey's not poor, it's just poorly managed. Budget 2019, 35 million for capital projects and 50 million forward for the short-term business plan. My mission would be to block unnecessary states capital spending, with the exception of health and education projects, so we can put money back in the community, help people, and energise the economy. I'm an independent, not part of any political party, not influenced by loyalties to the honorary system or other states members. And I'm a fearless, tough negotiator that won't be swayed. My loyalties are to the people and their needs. I will listen to you, the public, and take actions that will improve the lives of all the community and support local struggling businesses. Please visit my website, votetroy.uk, or the vote.je website. Please read my manifesto, follow my social media, and vote Gordon George Troy on the 27th of February. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
Inna Gardner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to join us this wintry, rainy evening. I'm Inna Gardner, and I do care about our community and Jersey. I chose Jersey 10 years ago to be my home. And together with my Jersey-born husband, David, we started our family in your district. Today, I'm standing here and asking for your trust, and your vote. So, probably you're asking who I am and why vote for me. I'm CPC, Community Project Creator, with background in social work and business consulting. What does it mean? I'll give you an example. While canvassing during the last election campaign in May, I was heartbroken meeting senior citizens sitting alone at home for days without simple human connections. Okay, I decided, let's see what I can do. I found community space available at Center Point, empty during the mornings. I put resources and need together and created Friends of Lapukale, coffee morning club for senior citizens that run now every Friday. We are adding more activities for different ages at Lapukale. As a member of First Tower Committee, I'm also involved with creating similar community hub with similar activities as First Tower. Hopefully it will come in the next 6 months, a year. Hopefully it will go forward. I'm a woman of my word. Whatever I promised in my manifesto, I have done, while I'm still working mother. Much more can be done when I can dedicate all my time to Jersey community. On top of this, for the last 20 years, I worked with companies, helping them to go through organizational change. Our public services are going through major changes. I read last 6 months' report from the state CEO, and it disturbs me that I couldn't find proper, measurable, long-term targets. If elected, I will use this expertise to protect public interest. For me, flourishing Jersey, it's joint forces between businesses, government, charities, and residents. I'll ask your vote, and I'll be independent voice, strong voice, in the assembly. You can find more on my website, inagardener.com. Thank you for considering voting for me.
Anthony Lewis.
My name is Ant Lewis, and I'm asking you to consider me for your vote in this by-election. A vote for me is a vote for a fresh approach from a different kind of candidate. I'm a St. Helier resident who is passionate about our environment, our community and our future. That's why I want to offer my energy, enthusiasm and experience as one of your representatives in the State's Assembly. I am a 50-year-old father and grandfather who worked for many years in print and broadcast journalism in Jersey. My personal experience of disability following a stroke 10 years ago has shown me the very best of Jersey as a community, but I know that we can do more. Richard Rondell, whose untimely death has caused this by-election, was an excellent deputy who understood the value of that community and worked tirelessly to support it. I am putting my name forward and asking for your vote because I want to continue that work and believe I can make a contribution to the future well-being of the residents of St. Helier and of Jersey. I hope you'll see my campaign material in print or online, and I'd be happy to take any questions from you after this meeting, or at any on social media, but I'd summarize my campaign with 5 key pledges about what I believe in, and 5 key promises to you. My 5 key promises to you are: I'll take a proposal to the states to take GST off food. I'll fight development in this district that puts more pressure on parking and open spaces. I'll work hard to promote more cycle paths and traffic calming in the district. I'll work hard for you and answer your questions honestly. I'll propose a new hospital at Overdale or by combining the existing site with Parade Gardens. My 5 key pledges are about my principles and the priorities that are important to me. I believe in equality in society and I want to see Jersey continue to progress. I want education and training opportunities for all our young people to give them a fair chance. I believe in the importance of our natural and built environment for all of us. I want more affordable housing for young families struggling to get on the ladder. I believe in sustainable population controls balancing economic and environmental needs. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a summary of how I want to represent you. We see a lot of U-turns from politicians on anything from the hospital to Ann Court, but those promises and pledges are important to me, and I hope they are important to you. Above all, I'm standing because I think that our community deserves better from politicians. Please, when you're casting your vote in this by-election, consider voting for me, and Lewis, a fresh approach from a different kind of candidate.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates for that. I'm now going to open the floor to questions. I'll be taking questions two at a time and then asking each of the candidates to answer in turn. They're each allowed 2 minutes to give their answers. So I would just ask 2 minutes in total, 2 minutes each candidate. This is designed for residents of District 3 and 4, so I'll open the floor to questions. There is a microphone which perhaps the gentleman at the back could pass on.
Can everyone hear me?
Okay.
I'll just,
If you just
That microphone.
can we get the names?
Hello, good evening. I am a local resident, have been for over a decade here. I'm just wondering what the panel's view is on the pension of poverty that we have on this very wealthy island of ours and what they intend to do about it.
Thank you very much. Is there another question? Gentleman at the back.
Yes, good evening. Could I ask each member on the panel to tell us where they think the hospital should be sited?
Okay, thank you very much. So there's two questions, one about pensioner poverty and one about the hospital site. So if we can start with Francesca. Oh, sorry, go.
Pensioner poverty is clearly an issue. We have an awful lot of very wealthy pensioners here, but we should never have pensioners in poverty, albeit relative poverty, because that's the more accurate description. That is a matter that I can't stand here and give you an immediate answer of how I will fix it. That's something I would have to sit down with certainly the Social Security Minister and see what the options are. But my preference is clearly to ensure that there is a minimum level of pension availability so that people who are retired can live a decent life and especially be cared for if required. I thought the hospital question might come up. I'm sure we all heard the phrase too many cooks. In this case, it may be just the one cook and a rather bad recipe. I actually don't believe in the single hospital. I thought the original dual site solution was quite adequate. I think that the current location of the General Hospital, which badly needs maintenance because it hasn't been done, is convenient for people to get to in town. And I think the other obvious site is Overdale, where we have a vast number of derelict buildings, a lot of space already owned by the land, and apparently some French people who say they can come along and do it for less than £100 million. Quite a contrast from the £900 million that you've never been told about, but which is actually the total figure, including repayments for the original plan. Those are my two locations.
Thank you very much. Nick.
The hospital, well, anywhere but Gloucester Street, I think, where it would simply have been a wind tunnel, a huge battleship sitting there, wholly inappropriate. The possibility seems to be Overdale. I was round the site. I'm not an expert on this, but I would take advice. I would see what the experts had to say to us and persuade us. It's a bit like Brexit, the hospital at the moment. It's crowding out all the other social issues that are very important and need to be addressed, and that includes pensioner poverty. Because we live in an island which is grossly unequal, and that inequality is ever growing, and it's something I want to address. And there's no one in the States who's really shouting about it and saying it's wholly unacceptable. There are lots of issues, an ageing population, and we're forcing people to stay in their homes, and we aren't properly addressing the issues of how those homes are adapted. Andium homes, for example, this idea of the rents being at 90% of market rent, they're simply propping up exorbitant rents in the private sector. A lot of pensioners will be looking to go into those sort of housing if they don't own, and they're hoped to be protected. At least they have security of tenure there. But generally, they're dependent. The problem is, of course, that we have a low tax, low spend model, and the income that's generated tends to go to modest welfare and modest provision. That is the problem. If you want better services, you're going to have to pay more tax. We're going to have to find a way to tax companies, and particularly tax the wealthy, because capital is avoiding tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea.
I hope you'll forgive me for sitting. My back's, I've got a little problem with my back this evening, so I do apologise. Pensioner poverty, yes. First and foremost, we need to be looking at rent reduction from Andium homes and the sheltered housing as well for our pensioners. We need to look at removing or lowering the taxation on our state pension as well. GST on food, that needs to be removed. And I will absolutely oppose any cuts to support pensioners. Any cuts by Social Security Department. Those who have worked hard all their lives and contributed to society deserve to retire with dignity and should certainly not be on the agenda for governmental cutbacks. With the hospital, we need to be informed. Whilst I know that many of you would love to say, right, let's build it here, we have to now be fully informed of what sites are viable for the hospital. I know a lot of people have talked about Overdale. Overdale would need a complete road restructuring in order to facilitate that, a multi-storey car park. And so there's a lot involved in terms of where the hospital site's going to be. So it's about having the right leadership and finding the right site. So I certainly don't want to sit here and say, I believe it's this and believe it's this. We need to be informed and have the right information before we can make that decision. And I think that we all need, as a community, to be part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Okay, pensioner poverty. When I think about the biggest costs that pensioners face, it has to be around rent. So bringing forward some rent controls, I think, would help with that. Also, the social security system needs to be there for those who are in need and to help people get back on their feet when they fall on hard times. I would oppose any further cuts to the income support budget, and also I want to protect additional programmes such as Pension Plus and the Pensioners' Christmas Bonus. I also would support any proposition that was brought forward to stop a GST on food. When it comes to the future hospital, building on the current site would cause too much disruption to services, and it's unfair on patients and staff. I would favour a town-based site that's easily accessible to emergency vehicles and public transport. And for me, there are currently two viable options, that being Overdale and the waterfront. I believe that business cases for both need to be assessed and that a decision needs to be made quickly, but not in haste.
Thank you. Geraint.
The thing about poverty is that it's particular people who suffer from it, and therefore the solutions have to be targeted. We can't look at pensioners as a single category. It's those pensioners in need, those in need of protection, who need the targeting in terms of housing, in terms of income support, and in terms of social exclusion. So it's putting them into a network, providing that safety net, and ensuring that nobody falls through the cracks and nobody is forgotten. But it's not just about pensioners, it's about everyone who's suffering from poverty and social exclusion in this island. When it comes to the hospital, it's quite clear that there is no ideal site. Every site which has been considered has major problems. It just turns out that the Gloucester Street site appeared to have more evident problems to the Environment Minister than other ones. But basically it boils down to, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or what anyone else's preference is. None of the sites will meet the requirements of the island plan. So it all depends on what the Environment Minister will make an exception for. What the state should have done in the first place is to have passed a paving law to define the parameters within which a hospital, as an overriding priority for this island, would be acceptable, and then it would have, the site would have been identified to fit within those parameters, and we'd have known what we'd be working with. I'd like it to be in town, but we can't fit everything in town. A hospital can be somewhere else in the island, but it's always about that balance, about accessibility, affordability, practicality, but above all, it's about the health of our future.
Thank you. John.
Pensioners. Well, I think the states treat the pensioners rather like they do their property. They own the problem, but they don't want to spend any money on them. And I think this is something that needs addressing. Obviously, the amount of pension that gets paid out is probably one of the lowest in Europe. GST is a major problem. So when it comes down to it, the major problems that pensioners have are they may have increases in their pension, but they're very soon eaten up with increases in rent and increases in the cost of living. However, loneliness is one problem that certainly needs addressing as well. And that's something that I mentioned earlier, the Youth and Community Trust in St Helier is looking at in terms of getting some community centres opened. And I hope that will go some way to addressing that situation. As to the hospital, I think if you are realistic about this from a business point of view, you look at the first plan that was put up for these, what I call the Twin Towers, 150 feet in the air. That was a planning busting exercise. And if that had been passed, and it was just a ridiculous plan, it would have increased the value of all the commercial property in St Helier, because suddenly, there's an extra 40, 50 feet that they could put their buildings up. So maybe there was some financial incentives behind that. But it's clear, 2 planning inquiries and an awful lot of work, 20 odd million pounds wasted, 41 million pounds spent, and we've gone full circle. To me, the obvious example, and I've looked at it recently with a number of people, is the Overdale site. It's something that's crying out for investment. We've already got a hospital there. It's in the island plan that's the sort of location it should be, and it's crying out for reinvestment. So rather than put it at Warwick Farm and then still have to spend money at Overdale and then still have to spend money at Gloucester Street, Overdale's the solution, and then do something very sensible like social housing and a park with Gloucester Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon.
Hi, your question on the hospital. I don't know where it's going to go, but it looks like everything is leaning towards Overdale, especially as Warwick Farm has been let on a 9-year lease for hemp growing. So the main thing with the hospital is we need to get on with it, get it sorted and get it built with the right needs for the people, because that takes me on to pensioners, because pensioners often need a hospital more frequently than anybody else. And I'm passionate about helping the Jersey pensioner, who for a long time has been politically overlooked and undervalued by the government. The pension scheme is meant to help people achieve and maintain financial independence. In my opinion, it falls well short of this. One of the main political aims, if elected, will be to assist pensioners to get better pension benefits, better healthcare and better housing designed to meet their needs. Our senior citizens have helped create our island's prosperity. We must do our very best to look after them. This government has failed pensioners, cutting their pleasures like means testing their Christmas bonus. The rise in GST by government was an effective pay cut to pensioners. The government has done little to improve the pensioners' quality of life. It's time to value, respect and appreciate our pensioners again. We've heard about the minimum wage, now the livable wage. But have we ever heard anything about a livable pension? No, not a thing. If elected, I'll try and make the phrase livable pension a reality by bringing propositions to the states to improve your lives. I intend appointing a commission to look at how we can improve every aspect of pensioners' lives, from pension payments to healthcare and diet and exercise, well-being and community life. So I hope the pensioners will vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ina.
I think it's obvious. People who worked all their life and contributed to Jersey economy, contributed to Jersey, have to have proper, decent life when they're retired. So I do support any proposition that will bring pensioners to better level of their life. First of all, I do think that we need to look at our community services that can be available for all senior citizens, that they can continue to live in their homes, in their place, as much as it's safe for them to stay there and enjoy their life and have a community around. Second, I think it will be interesting to look at different schemes that are available now in the UK. For example, Andrew can look at building house for pensioners with all accommodations for community services on the ground floor, if it will be small cafe, if it will be community room where they can sit together and watch TV and have a fire and live in small flats. And if somebody don't come down for a day, they can come and knock on the door and they can look out for each other and have this small community together. I will support a proposition. I never agreed with GST on food, and I will support any proposition that will come into the States. Hospital. It's a very complex issue. I'm not a specialist. I'm not sure how many specialists here in building hospitals, but what I know that personally I would like to see the facts. I will look through the facts that are available to the States members if I am elected. If I'll have doubts on these facts, if I'm not agreeing with the facts, I'll ask more questions. As a business consultant, I used to do it for the last 20 years. I believe the person decision as good as information that he has. So if I'll have full information, I can make a decision.
Thank you very much.
You.
Ant.
I think the...
No, sorry, Francesca.
sorry. I thought you wanted... Sorry. My mistake, sorry.
No, sorry.
I think the biggest tragedy that's facing our senior citizens is the fact that a lot of them are putting their health and their very lives at risk because they can't afford to go and see a GP. I think that's one of our biggest challenges that we have to address as a community. And I've put social security reform on my manifesto for this exact reason. I think we do a lot for children and for people with children, but not enough for the elderly and for disabled adults and their carers, and that's what we really need to focus on, in my opinion. So that would be my answer to the first question. For the second question, the hospital location. Well, okay, it's a bit dangerous, I suppose, to know all colours to the mast so early on. I don't think that Overdale is necessarily a good idea. In fact, I really don't think it's a good idea. I can't imagine you ever getting planning permission to build a structure more than 3 stories high on a hill that height, for the obvious fact that it would be visible from Alderney. Also, I think that the access to it is inadequate. I think the idea of smashing down senior citizens' houses to make way for a car park is abhorrent. And I'm just not pleased with the way that whole process has been dealt with. That being said, I'm not married to any site in particular. And I very much think that the most important thing when it comes to the hospital is that we get it agreed and we get it in motion as soon as possible. So that would absolutely be my focus were I to be successful in this election. I would oppose Overdale initially, but if that is the only site that we can get permission for, then so be it. We just have to move on.
Thank you. Ant.
Cost. Life is getting more and more expensive for more and more of us. We don't need a review or another report. We need to remove GST from food as a first step, and then to look at what more can be done. The utilities should be praised for keeping price increases low, but given that they are all entirely or majority states owned, they should be limited by statute to the RPI for any price increases. Hospital. The failure by the states to deal with this issue makes us a laughingstock. We have nothing to show for an estimated £38 million worth of expenditure. The priorities should be A. To find a site. B. to build the hospital, and C, to establish who is accountable for this expensive failure. It is not good enough to talk about lessons being learned. This is wasted money that could have been spent on our schools, on sustainable homes, or taken from our tax bills entirely, or used as compensation for removing GST from food.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates for their answers. Any more questions? Yes, could the chap with the microphone move to the middle? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Ailing Phillip. I'm a resident of this area. I'm also a States employee. How would the candidates suggest resolving the current impasse between the States workers with the pay dispute and the powers of the CEO, Charlie Parker? What views have they got to resolve this conflict?
Thank you. And another question?
Yeah, sorry, hi. What do you think is the #1 issue facing islanders today?
Okay, thank you very. Okay, I'll recap those questions for the candidates. The first one was about resolving the impasse on states' pay and the powers of the state CEO. And the second question was, what's the #1 issue facing the island at the moment? And we start this time with Nick.
The pay impasse, it's very simple. It's called a general strike. You all walk out and you make it as disruptive as possible, and then they will pay attention, because it's very clear that politicians are not running this. There is some kind of inner cabal. The Charlie Parkers, who employed him, and the major generals. There is this sort of inner group of the state which is intent on its neoliberal policies of cuts, cuts, cuts and more cuts, and a restructuring that's going to affect the quality of services. So, yeah, it needs to be really short, nearly shrift, and it's got to be directed. I will be at that demonstration on Saturday, and I think that's going to be big, and it's going to indicate to those who hold power in this island that the civil servants are angry, and they're going to vote accordingly. #1 issue facing the island depends on your social situation, and one of the things I'm finding, well, I'll think of two things, but the first one will probably be rents and the price of housing for certain social groups. For those who actually cannot afford to buy, cannot get on because of the high prices, rents are going up. I met one lady today who said that her rent had gone up £50 per month because of the RPI, 3 to 4% increase, an annualised lease. That needs to end. We need to have longer leases. We need to have a rent tribunal as well. The other issue would be, and I see it coming up, is for those who have children, it's got to be affordable, if not free, childcare. It isn't available, the state gives a little bit, and if you take it privately, it's incredibly expensive. That should all be organised collectively. We've got a constable of this parish that does nothing about that issue. They've got parish property which could be used. There are those who would run it. Let's do it.
Thank you very much. Andrea.
Well, quite simply with the pay dispute, as far as I'm concerned, we pay them. Our nurses and our teaching staff absolutely and fundamentally deserve that pay. The concern I have with Charlie Parker is not exactly what he's trying to implement, but it's the manner in which he's doing it. He's convinced he's right, and he'll do whatever he takes to deliver it, regardless of our rules and our customs. He's trying to implement a model that worked for him in the UK, but this is an island, and we have very different cultural differences to that of the UK. And I believe that there's not been enough consideration for the excellence we have on this island already. And what is important to remember, that Charlie Parker works for the States Assembly. The States Assembly does not work for Charlie Parker. But we can't lay all the criticism at Charlie Parker's door. The States Assembly need to take responsibility for the current outrage felt by islanders and our workers. And they need to gain control and have better leadership over the situation and achieve what they set out to do in a respectful and a dignified manner. And this is clearly lacking, the support and engagement with our healthcare and our teaching staff. But what also concerns me is the fact that we have over 30 UK temporary consultants that were drafted in by Charlie Parker, and that we're unable to find the necessary skill set in Jersey to fill these roles. And if that's true, then there's a fundamental flaw if we're unable to find individuals on this island and having to pay exorbitant fees hiring outside UK consultants. So that's something that desperately needs to be addressed. In terms of what we're facing on the island at the moment, obviously the hospital saga, failing to look after our islanders, minimum wage and poverty in the island, with the amount of money that's generated, the inefficiency in the public service, immigration, the population policy was supposed to allow for 325 a year, and we have in excess of 1,000 a year, the environment, delivery of affordable housing, and the failure to listen to the needs of our communities displayed by the lower voter turnout and the failure to engage with our electorate. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay.
The answer to the two questions are very linked for me, because I do believe that the current public sector problems is actually the number one issue facing the island today. The employer, the State's Employment Board, needs to get back round the table for a constructive discussion with the unions. The only way that this can happen, as I said in my previous speech, is for Deputy Southern's proposition to get back to the States and for us to be able to go back to the spending that is available to the States members to pay employees the proper wage. I think that the CEO powers should be reviewed. There appears to be a bully boy attitude at the moment at the top, which needs to stop. And I also think that waste within the public sector, as Andrea just alluded to with consultants, as a public servant, I've seen lots and lots of fly in, fly out consultants coming in at exorbitant rates, not knowing the island, and trying to tell us what to do. With regard to political oversight over public sector reform and changes, I think this is a systemic problem. The current system is dysfunctional due to individual members having competing priorities. And so that's individual members of the Council of Ministers as well as the states. This has enabled senior civil servants to pull the strings. Public sector reform needs to be led by elected representatives.
Thank you. Geraint.
I will start by declaring an interest. As a worker in the public sector, I think I deserve a pay rise. I've taught in the public sector in schools since the beginning of the millennium. If I'm not elected, I'll be carrying on, I hope, working to provide cultural services, promotion, and generally trying to make things better. But you can't keep squeezing people in the public sector to do more with less and seeing their income eroding and expecting the same sort of loyalty and commitment when they're being stabbed in the back by people who don't understand the commitment they've given for so many years. Now, there's been talk about Charlie Parker's creative disruption, and from within the public sector, we've seen a lot of disruption. Not only have people seen their incomes being eroded, they've been made to feel insecure, unvalued, and really not knowing what the direction is. There's been no grip, there's been no strategy, there's been a lot of spin, and it's made a lot of people very giddy, and I've been feeling seasick myself. What's the biggest problem facing us all in this island and in this parish and in this district? I would say it's sustainability. How in the future do we sustain our economy successfully? How do we sustain our environment so it's clean, healthy, that we can bring children up in, that we can look forward to a healthy, long life? And how do we sustain our society and community, keeping those bonds together, whether we're in the public sector or the private sector? We should all be one community. I'm not so keen on one government, the Charlie Parker style, but I do believe in one community.
John.
Well, I think I can give you some straightforward answers here. State workers, these are frontline important people. They need to be paid. Simple as that. And the solution, I think, is really that we look at what's happening with Charlie Parker in his team. That man's been through 3 boroughs in the UK. He's using exactly the same model in each of those boroughs. He's known as the hatchet man. He's even come into Jersey and he's renamed government departments with the same names, that he used in the UK. He's moved from salaries of, say, in Westminster, about 170,000. Suddenly, he arrives in Jersey and he's worth much more, 250,000. Why? We've got people are on £27,000 a month. That's £324,000 a year. Why? This is Jersey. So, let's stop the Charlie Parker gravy train in its tracks and use that money to pay the state's workers that really should deserve it. And let's appoint some Jersey people to do this job, which is not rocket science, which is in essence just getting rid of that silo mentality that the state's departments had, and have some joined up thinking. Then, one issue, well, there is only one issue, it's population, because everything goes back to population. The more you let the population increase, the more pressure you put on everything. Rents go up. We need a new hospital. We need a new sewage farm. I mean, if you go back to 50 years ago, we had a population half of what it is now, and we didn't need half of the extra investment. Now we've got a burgeoning population, and we have to spend 70 million on a sewage farm, 466 million on a hospital, 100 millions for Angium to build new houses. Let's control population. That will solve a lot of the problems.
Thank you. Gordon.
Yes. The number one issue facing Jersey is really how government focuses finance in the right place. And at the moment, what we have is most finance is focused on their capital projects, like the new police station, where they bomb-proofed the underground section of it to, for millions, spending £21 million when the old police station had a fantastic record of reducing crime. This unnecessary spending is better spent within the community. If they take these capital projects money and put it in the community to help people, instead of building another new building, or, it's going to be the airport next, there's going to be 65 million spent there. And that will give us the most expensive airport in Europe, I'm sure. So that's the problem facing us. And civil service pay, yes, they need to be paid. And austerity needs to be removed from the civil service and, all pay. And instead of the austerity measures being applied to wages, they really need to be applied to these capital spending projects, where we've got to stop it and block it so that they cannot spend, and they've got to put the money in our community and look after our people who deserve better than what we're getting now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ina.
I believe it's absolutely disgraceful to treat our public servants and didn't give them pay rise for the last 10 years. Some of them didn't have pay rise for 10 years. It shouldn't be this way. The public servants deserve their pay rise, and it's all about priorities. I have had conversations, and apparently our state budget did well over the last 2 years, and we did have an income, an unexpected income from finance. To meet the wages with the inflation, we require 9 million per year, if we're going just with the inflation, and it can be set in the budget if we'll put our priorities straight. Regarding Charlie Parker, I mentioned in my open speech, and what I think, nobody was 27,000. I think it's really a very high amount for outside consultant who is coming to the island and going. But what disturbs me even more, I read 2 days ago in the newspapers that some of the consultants are going to disappear. And they're going to disappear without giving the results. They come here to work, we pay them good money. Give us at least results, give us numbers, give us strategy, where we are going, what we need to achieve within 2, 3, 4 years, where we'll find ourselves. So this is my answer about both pay rise and Charlie Parker. About main issue that facing the island, we can all say it's rent, it's environment, it's housing, it's hospital. But for me, who come from outside of the island, I'm 10 years on the island, I love this island. I fall in love with that island. I decided to stay here, and my daughter is going to grow here. I would like to see community. Together we are stronger. We are 100,000 people, but we are so divided and we are fighting. Let's try to get the social inclusion working and start to talk to each other, start to communicate and find common ground and move forward. With all other issues we can resolve through the right communication and working together.
Yeah, thank you. Francesca.
I don't personally think we can lay the blame for the states workers' impasse purely at Charlie Parker's feet, because of course there's the fact that the States Employment Board should have dealt with this last year, at the end of last year, and worked it into the budget for 2019. So there's that element of it as well. Obviously, yeah, Charlie Parker is a very contentious figure, and I'm not saying that I agree with everything he does, but at the same time, I think the bigger problem isn't the mandate that he's being given, which I broadly agree with. I think the problem is actually more how he does things. You know, the communications team that doesn't communicate, the the technocratic interviews in which he says we are in change and nobody knows what it means, you know, and things like that, obviously, I think are more of a problem because, as Mrs. Gardner has pointed out, we don't really know where we're at with that, and we have no real way of measuring the objectives he is supposed to have be achieving. So that is an issue, and that's obviously that comes back into accountability. We need Mr. Parker to be accountable to the government and to the people. As for the number one issue facing islanders, well, this is a difficult one because obviously it depends again how long term you're thinking. Very long, if you take the very long view, obviously it's climate change because the island will disappear under the sea. If you take a sort of medium range view, obviously sustainability, as Mr. Jennings said. But I think at the moment, obviously, the number one issue is the fact that in 5 years' time, we could very well end up without a functioning hospital anywhere on the island because the current site is deteriorating, and it's deteriorating at an alarming rate, and we'll need an enormous amount of money sunk into it just to keep it functioning. So that would be it.
Thank you. Guy.
I think we need a little bit of perspective here. We seem to have forgotten about a very large number of employees who work in the private sector. It's nice to be able to go out on strike, isn't it? But if you're working in the private sector, you'll be sacked if you don't turn up for work. And these are people who haven't had a pay rise for 10 years, just the same as civil servants. Now, I'm sure that amongst that cadre, there's some very deserving cases. I'm a carer at the moment for an elderly relative, and the nice lady who used to come round and help out announced recently she's going back to Birmingham. I said, why is that? She said, well, after I pay my rent, I've got hardly any money left over. So clearly, this is a major problem. Someone asked the number one issue. The number one issue for many people is keeping a roof over their heads and trying to find money that they can at least exist on when they're paying these vast rentals. But that all relates us back to what the fundamental issue is, which is a completely flawed economic growth policy and a population growth that doesn't even have a policy in place yet. They've only just started to think about it. Now, I don't particularly want to lump all the blame on particular civil servants. I don't know who organised the bloodless coup that appears to have taken place, where all the senior people appear to have been drafted in from the United Kingdom. But one thing I do know is that most of the blame for what's going on lies at the feet of states members, who last year handed over all accountability from themselves to two people, the Chief Minister and the Chief Executive Officer. And it's the Chief Executive Officer who has all the advice coming to him from the entire civil service, and he advises the Chief Minister. I just leave you to work out who do you think is running the island.
Thank you. Ant.
Resolving pay dispute with states employees. I support public sector workers who feel that they have been exploited over pay, excluded from the debate over their own future, and taken for granted by an employer that knows many of them have no options because only the states employs people with their skills. Reform was absolutely necessary to pay and terms, but it has been mishandled by an expensive group of UK imported civil servants on enormous pay. who will be long gone by the time the full mess becomes apparent, and who will never be held to account. I will be joining the protests against this cuts program even though I think some reform is necessary. My issue is with how the process has been handled, and the total failure to communicate in a meaningful way. Number one issue facing islanders today: population. We all know that the population is too high, and that ministers have ignored this problem because they don't want to face the facts. Of course we need people to come in and do jobs, and of course we benefit from having different people from different countries here, but the numbers are just too high. We need a return to sensible controls, and that means a cap on the number of people who can enter Jersey to live and work.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Could we get a microphone to the lady in the middle?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jean McLaughlin, and I would like to ask you, what are we going to do for St Helier House? Where, as you keep saying, and I get fed up of hearing this, the older population. We are senior citizens and should be treated as senior citizens. We've worked all our life hard in this island, and we need to have respect, not the older population, as you keep referring to us. We are senior citizens, and with the growing of dementia, what is going to happen when all these people are really bad, and what's going to happen to St Helier House, because we need these places to put these lovely people in who have served the island all their life and through no fault of their own have got this terrible illness. Can you please answer that question, please? And also, is there also all these care homes at the ridiculous prices that they're charging? Have you got no control on how much they charge the people to put their loved ones in there? Because they do charge enormous prices, and it is ridiculous. Can you please answer those questions, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another question? No? Okay, we'll take this one then. We'll stick with 2 minutes for each candidate again. So the question is, what are you going to do about St Helier House, and some general questions about senior citizens and care home charges. So if we can start with Andrea.
First and foremost, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that the care homes were, and specifically St Helier House, was allowed to deteriorate to such a level that now it's as far as I'm aware, it's actually now been closed. And the fact that once again our senior citizens seems to be on the last on the list of the agenda for our government, and we certainly need you senior citizens have put into the system their entire lives, and the lack of respect and dignity that you've been given when you retire is outrageous, and it's certainly something that I will be looking into if I'm elected. Again, we spoke earlier about pensioner poverty, and once again, we need to be looking at how we can support our senior citizens in a far more supportive way than we have been doing. And obviously those that I will be looking at social security reform in that respect, and obviously how we can support you in that manner. And also we need to look at our healthcare system to ensure, because dementia is actually going to be one of the biggest issues that we're going to be facing of our population, and we need to make sure that the facilities are there to be able to cater for our ageing populace, and specifically dementia as well. So I'll make sure that if I'm elected, that will be certainly priority in the healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Hello, thank you for your question. I know the value of care homes to families in St Helier because my gran was very well cared for in St Ewolds. I disagree with one of the other panel members around capital expenditure. I think it's absolutely fundamental that we maintain our properties and have the right capital budgets so that we can continue to maintain properties such as St Helier House. With a growing ageing population, we are going to need to think really carefully about how we provide care for older people in the future. I don't have a direct answer to your direct question about St Helier House, and it's something that I would need to look at in more detail if I were elected. And care home charges as well. I think this is something that links in with the long-term care levy and the amount of money that is available for long-term care and support. But yes, thank you for your question.
Thank you. Geraint.
I'm going to have to be very careful here, because as Procureur du Bain Public, in charge of parish property, I'm actually privy to some of the information regarding negotiations about the future of St Helier House. I can assure you that the parish, which owns St Helier House, which runs St Newolds, which has an excellent reputation in terms of looking after people of advancing years, planning for the future. We're building a new dementia unit at St Newolds. We had a plan which involved phasing out St Helier House, because we knew it was coming to the end of its usable life, and being able to expand St Newolds and then think about redeveloping, including Maison de Ville. Unfortunately, planning requirements and the Grenfell new restrictions meant that everything had to be accelerated, and we went through a painful process of having to close St Helier House. But we are looking at what we can do in the future to best serve the community, both the older community and the younger community. Certainly, we can do more in terms of providing a whole range of facilities, such as including more sheltered housing, as well as caring for those people with dementia, trying to keep people together in couples where possible. But all this costs, and there is, if we're providing a good service and paying the workers properly to provide that service, then we need to have the income to cover those costs, whether it's from ratepayers, whether it's from the users, or whether it's from the states actually financing the care island-wide, whether it's provided by parish, private providers, or by the states.
Thank you. John.
First of all, Jean, thank you very much. You're somebody that's raised the problem, and I think you've worked quite hard to address this problem and ask these questions, just not just tonight, but in the past. So thank you. St Helier House, Geraint, obviously has, as a procureur, has even more responsibility than I have. I'm on the Roads Committee, but certainly St Helier House is something that is on the agenda for discussion, and it's something that the Roads Committee will be looking at in the very near future. And the parish will be bringing a proposition to the parish assembly very soon, within months. And I've got my own views, obviously, but if the hospital is put up in Overdale, I would see St Helier House as an ideal location for hospital staff. There has been talk about some residential accommodation up at Overdale. We don't know whether it's possible to use the Rondell Fields for that, whether the Island Plan or the Planning Minister would allow it. But I tell you what, a good possibility is the fact that if we go to Overdale, then Westaway Court is available. Now, that's quite a large building. OK, it needs certainly refurbishing, but there's a possibility. It's in the ownership of the states. It's in the ownership of public health, because it was previously doctors' and nurses' accommodation. So that could be refurbished specifically to look after the elderly. However, to be fair, I'm not a medical expert, and dementia is quite a complicated thing. And I know my wife, who's here tonight, her father suffered from dementia, and he suffered a couple of years actually in a hospital bed. So it may be that dementia units needs to be more associated with the hospital, but certainly that there's lots that needs to be done in that respect. But Westaway Court, which is on the corner of Rouge Bouillon, is a good possibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Gordon.
Thanks for asking this question. I have in my family dementia. My father is currently at Lakeside, And he was once a very strong body and strong-minded man, and now he's like a child, which is really depressing and upsetting for us all at home. But this is what takes us as we become senior citizens and head towards the end. And my father is in end-of-life care. Well, you know, he's in end-of-life care. He's going to go at some time, and as much as we love him, and this was my point before, that, you know, the whole pensioner system and St Helier House included, we can't afford to lose that space for people with dementia. And, you know, I said before that if I was elected, I intend appointing a commission to look at how we can improve all aspects of pensioners' lives, from pension payments to healthcare, diet and exercise, to well-being and community life. And, you know, dementia is something that's got to come in that, and we've got to work out how we can cope with the future dementia sufferers, because there's going to be more and more that are going to get ill with the sad disease. Thanks.
Thank you. Ina.
Jean, thank you very much for your question. And what I would like to look at, how we can bring together charities that do amazing, great job with people with dementias. Parish, town hall, parish, states, volunteers. There is lots of things going around, but I do think we are at this place that we have to develop strategy and long-term plan for our future, for future of our senior citizens, because people will continue to live longer, and I hope they will live happy life, and we need to ensure that they have a available, suitable space to continue enjoy their life if there is dementia or without dementia. We need to really find these suitable spaces. For me, St Helier House, if I'll be elected, I will try to ensure if we don't have this space, we have similar space available for St Helier residents that can care. Generally talking about state properties that are rated and gone out of use and been closed because of this, I think it's wrong way. We need really to look at our property. But going back to the senior citizens, the overlooking strategy that bringing together specialists and the people from administration and charities will probably make it work.
Francesca.
So with regard to St Helier House, obviously, I mean, I appreciate Mr Jennings' candour. It certainly sounds like a failure to me. I think it's the same problem as the hospital in essence. It's the allowing things to become neglected for so long and doing nothing to replace them in time. That's the issue here that needs to be addressed. Obviously, St Helier House does need to be replaced. I very much appreciate what you said about senior citizens. I totally agree with you. As for the ridiculous care home prices, well, the first thing we need to investigate is I don't really understand this long-term care allowance, because I don't understand what it's actually going towards, to be honest. I think that would be the first thing that we need to review. How is that long-term care allowance benefiting people who are in receipt of care? That's the connection that I'm failing to appreciate at the moment. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with reviewing those things and replacing St Helier House.
Thank you. Guy.
As I said earlier, I'm a carer, and I can assure you I'm on a fast learning curve right now about dementia and what it's all about. And do I take it seriously? Yes, I do, very much so, not simply because of who I'm caring for, but because in 15 or 20 years' time, I could end up in the same situation. It's a lottery as to whether you get dementia or not once you get beyond certain ages. And this is a bigger issue than St Helier House. This goes right across the board, and the government has been very skillful in washing its hands of responsibility. I know from my current involvement that services are being withdrawn. There's no more chiropodist turns up at the daycare centre. Now, these are for old people who actually find it hard to get down and cut their own toenails, things that we don't take for granted, they can't really do. So services are being taken away. We've all been told how marvellous it is that we can look after these people in their own homes. Well, it's just as well, because if they had to rely on the states for accommodation, there wouldn't be any. It doesn't exist in great enough quantity. So it's all been either farmed out to the home and the family to deal with, or it's gone over to the private sector. And you have so many people in their old age who thinking, well, at some time I'll have to go into a home, but at £1,000 a week, we have a huge issue here, and it needs more homes. It needs homes designed in the right way. Dementia sufferers would probably be very happy to live in a small village community where they can entertain themselves and have that interaction, but not for huge amounts of money, which is where we are at the moment. I'm really serious about this because I'm getting old.
Thank you. Nick?
Don't get old, don't get ill. Care homes are, in one word, a racket. Often owned by UK companies, probably not paying tax here. They are sources of exploitation of their labour. I act for many care home employees. And when I go round knocking on the doors, as I've done in this district, I often come across care workers, and I often pump them for information. And I'm often shocked that they're prepared to tell me about the poor standards of care which operate in their home. But they're not and cannot say anything because they're not organised, they're not unionised, they dare not put their head above the parapet or they will be sacked. They're constantly told, if you don't like it, there's a door over there. That's the attitude of the management. That needs to change. After this election, I'm going back to help one particular lady, and we're going to unionise her institution, and we're going to get her pay rises, and we're going to get her a bank holidays, because the nurses get them, but she doesn't. It also affects the Portuguese community, the Polish community, the Romanian community, because they're the main workers in those sections. Likewise, in private care, I mean, I know personally some people who go out and do that. They've got these, they're going here, there, across the island, and it's very poor provision, and it's very expensive. We know, for the middle classes, that means the end of the home. You're going to send it. If your parent lingers, and that's the way it's viewed, the house will go. 60,000 a year, it's outrageous. There has to be another way to address it, but it's the problem of an ageing population, and it's coming rapidly, and we're going to have to address it by new forms of social solidarity to look after the elderly. That'll include me. Thank you.
Thanks. Ant?
Good question. No easy answer at the moment. People are living longer these days. That is a good thing, and the aging population should be seen as an opportunity, not primarily a problem. Many older members of the community have much to offer beyond normal retirement age, whether through sharing their wisdom and professional skills or volunteering to help charities of all kinds. They also have an increasingly important role in family life, which should be at the heart of St. Helier and Jersey. We also need to ensure, though a program of education and adaptation, that everyone in future has a sympathetic understanding of dementia.
Okay. I was just going to say, I'll check there's just no last questions, but the gentleman at the front, if we could find a microphone.
Thank you, Is that on? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Weston, I'm a member of the parish in this district. I'm surprised and concerned by the lack of practical economics in tonight's answers. It's very worrying. Everybody, I think, has mentioned the ageing population. everybody has mentioned the care needed for all of them and to look after them. Everybody has mentioned that this is very expensive to maintain our elderly population, even to the point of one candidate saying that it's extraordinarily expensive, and I'm just being polite about the words. We need, everybody said, again, more revenue spent by government. But governments don't have money. The taxpayer has the money, and the governments need the taxpayers' money. So it has to be paid by taxpayers. So whilst controlling immigration, which everybody, I think almost everybody has said is essential, and a very attractive idea, I have to ask the question, who is going to pay the more tax if there are too few immigrants permitted into the island? We need 2 tax-paying workers for every pensioner, particularly those who are on care, but they're all drawing pensions and have to be paid. And no candidate seems to have considered these logistical aspects. So please, would they consider now who is actually going to pay the bill if we have too few people coming into the island and not enough are being born to pay in the future? Taxes, the only alternative is that taxes will go up not to 20% or 25%, but up to 35 or 40%. Will be, of course, in the English situation. That's what's paid over there. So if that question could be considered, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? This will be the last chance to ask a question, so if you've got one, now is the time to say. Okay, thank you. So, I will take a second one now, yes.
What do you wish to do about Fort Regent?
Okay, thank you. So, the first question was around who's going to pay for increasing costs, particularly around the costs associated with the ageing demographic. And the second question was about what do you think should happen with Fort Regent? So we're going to start with Lindsay.
Okay, practical economics. I think the Reform Jersey Manifesto is very, very clear about where we stand with regard to tax. We would like to see, we've pledged to reduce the effective rate to all taxpayers except the highest earning 5%, who will be asked to pay slightly more. That would produce a net gain of 7.5 million in income. We also want to see a fairer social security contribution system. At the moment, there's an unfair burden on middle to low income earners, and we want to see the social security contributions being raised gradually for those higher earners to increase revenue. The other thing around states' expenditure is the amount of waste that currently happens within the states and reducing that waste. So reducing the expenditure on consultants, reducing the expenditure on projects that aren't actually, we're not seeing benefit for the islanders. So the eGov programme is one of those, one project that we could look at, the way that has been run. As far as the second question goes, Fort Regent, it's a place that's very dear to my heart. I used to work there, and as a teenager, I was even Humphrey. So I know how big that place is. It is a vast, vast site. It's also a heritage building. It's going to cost a lot of money to maintain. Whether it should continue to be a sports centre, I don't know. I don't think it's fit for purpose for that, but I do agree that it is a great entertainment venue, and it should be used potentially for that. So I think we need to gather some more ideas about the future of Fort Regent, so that we don't lose it as a valuable asset to the community.
Thank you. Geraint.
Well, of course, we need a population which will support the older population, but what we can't afford to do is just have uncontrolled immigration. It's got to be sensible immigration, because we do need people to provide services. But if those people are coming in large numbers, and simply not paying the tax to support the population as a whole, we're no better off. And in fact, we're having to pay for more housing, more facilities, more services in order simply to service a population which is growing and growing without necessarily producing the revenue. So we need to focus on where this revenue is coming from. It's from companies which are producing profits. Now, we need to look at the sustainability of the finance industry, but also look at the diversification into digital industries and creative industries, the sorts of industries which have high value, which are exportable in terms of services, but don't require large amounts of actual labour, and the labour they do have, if we're importing people to provide that and service those new industries, they're actually high value in terms of they're going to be paying lots of tax. Those are the sorts of industries we need to be focusing on in order to service that. Fort Regent should absolutely be an asset. It's been allowed to be neglected. I talk to tourists in the middle of town. They say, what's a good experience in Sedalia? I say, go up and see the panoramic views from the ramparts. And they say, what ramparts? They're invisible. They're overgrown. Other places which had these historic ramparts would be promoting them. There's all sorts of things we could do with the site. There has been report after report after report, year after year after year, and nothing's been done. But I think we should throw Pier Road car park into the mix.
John.
I listened to John Shenton, who's brother of Ben, on a scrutiny hearing just last week, I think it was, and he reminded us that our tax law is actually based on an English law which is over 100 years old. So I've been saying for ages we need a complete rethink on tax. 010 isn't working. I'm not saying throw it out the window, but I'm sure it could be rejigged. So we need a total tax rethink. I know Sarah Ferguson in the last government asked the question of Alan McLean, then Treasury Minister, what's happening with the rethink on tax? We're working on it, Sarah. I'll get back to you. Never happened. And I think we're in the same situation now. It's one of those things that is just brushed under the carpet. We need a total rethink on tax, not a tweak. We need the whole thing rejigged. We need social security looked at. And I think that really is the answer to how we're going to supply the money for these public services that Robert Weston's talking about. On Fort Regent, well, the only thing that's really going to work there, in my mind, is a public-private partnership. We have to find some sort of income so that the states don't have to keep pouring money into there. But generally speaking, I think Fort Regent is ideal for sport, but it could also be ideal for education. What about putting a university up there, maybe a sports university? But you do definitely need, as well as the income that could generate, you need something like a hotel, maybe, God forbid, even a casino. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon.
Yes. Yes, Robert, your question. I think I've given a way of saving money. You've said that we haven't thought about it. And because we do have about 35,000 pensioners now, and about 14,000 of those live abroad. And it is, if your calculations are right, we need 70,000 people to pay for that. So in theory, you've got to let more people in. But the population really does need to be controlled because we just cannot keep letting people in. But we've got to develop a population policy where we introduce permits which identify and test the community and economic value of migrants seeking in Jersey employment. We've got to be a bit like Australia, where if they need plumbers, plumbers come in, and America's the same. So the other way, the other thing about it all is making projects, capital projects. We keep spending money. If you look, we've got the alterations on the avenue a few years ago. There's a thing in the paper tonight about the cost of the waste disposal unit at Le Collet. We've had the the waste on the hospital. We've had huge excessive spend on the police station. I mean, you can just go on. And if we cut most of these projects, except for the medical stuff and the education, we're going to be able to pay for more things and put more money back in the community to look after. And that's my proposal. We save money and put it into the community for the people.
Thank you. Ina.
Robert, for your question, my answer will be divided into 3 parts. First part, we do need to have a review on our tax and social security systems and see what's happening there. Second part, recently I attended one of the scrutiny panel about the pay gap, and they mentioned that apparently we have 10% of the Jersey population who are not elderly, not senior citizens, not children, not people with disabilities, not with mental health, people who are able to work. And 10% of Jersey working population don't work and don't contribute into our economy. And this should be changed. I'm not talking about people who are not able to work or who are difficult to work or who worked enough for Jersey. People who are able to work and not working, and this number was mentioned at the scrutiny panel. And the third one, it's about our immigration population. I think we have to have a strategy to strike the right balance between the needs and our possibilities. For example, digital. Somebody mentioned digital. Last year we were granted around 60 permits. For 60 permits, that average salary, average wage is 51,000, which is nice tax income for them. Plus, they had to take 2 local people, train them with digital skills. So we can have this income. About Fort Regent, you have my answer in my leaflet. I do think Fort Regent needs to be kept to the people, community, sports center, maybe conference. Private-public partnership works for me as long as it keeps working and serving a Jersey community and Jersey population. Thank you.
Francesca.
So I don't think that, well, I think that given the amount of tax revenues that Jersey has, I don't think it's a question of whether or not we have the money to take care of our elderly. I think we quite clearly do. If we're bringing in, $750 million every year for a population of 100,000, is that right? I think that's sufficient to take care of our elderly and our disabled. I don't think it's a case of we don't have the money. I think the issue is that the state's wasted it. That's what I think the problem is, to be quite frank with you. I mean, we have spent 41 million on a hospital that doesn't exist only in our imaginations. Like, there's a problem with that. So, yeah, I think, and also, I mean, I found your point about immigration quite interesting, because obviously saying that by restricting immigration we'd be shooting ourselves in the feet because we wouldn't be able to take care of our ageing population is only true if immigrants don't get old. Immigrants get old just like everybody else, and if we increase the population, too much through immigration, then obviously it's just contributing to the problem. It's just going to go on and on. So, that would be my argument there. I think we do have the money and we do have the resources, and we just need to use them more wisely. With regard to Fort Regent, yes, I'm not in favour of a casino, but I am in favour of rejuvenation and getting it back to something of what it was, definitely.
Thank you. Guy?
I hope you'll forgive me if I slightly duck the revenue question, because it could all change depending on what happens with the UK and Brexit. And suddenly things we might want to do can't be done. But I will say a number of things. I believe in flat rate taxation. I don't buy the UK progressive tax system. It always amused me that people said, rich people don't pay enough money. Well, actually, 20% of one salary and 20% of a bigger salary, they are actually paying more tax. I think the one thing I would want to tackle very early on is 0-10, which has been a complete failure. And the other thing I would simply say is I listened to the Treasury Minister introducing the budget, and she said, and of course, we'll be continuing with our economic growth policy. and no one said a dicky bird for the rest of the entire state's meeting. I think the economic growth policy is fundamentally flawed. Just think about it. What's growing? What is growing? Immigration controls, let's have some, but immigration isn't going to fix everything. We still need people to come and work here. So we need a population growth policy, which the states have just started looking at. As to Fort Regent, well, I'm slightly conflicted here, because just over a year ago, when they asked for expressions of interest to do with Fort Regent, I put in an expression of interest. I'll tell you what it is. It's a public-private partnership. I want to build a multi-storey car park in the gap with links up to the top, so you can get from Snow Hill to the top of Fort Regent in 2 minutes. And I want to build a hotel where the swimming pool was.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just picture the design.
Okay, thank you. Nick.
Hi, I'm on the left. I call myself a socialist, and I have a critique of actually existing capitalism. The candidates up and down here are primarily of the right, various shades, and if you choose one of them, you'll get the same policies with no critique of what can possibly be done or any of the solutions that are going to affect would improve the lives of working people in this island. We've got a system here based on competitiveness, performance, profitability, and the trickle down of wealth from the top. We've got constant policy of tax exemptions for capital and companies. And the transfer of tax and the social burden is onto the households, especially the modest. And what we've got is increasingly unequal taxes of consumption in the name of competitiveness. That needs to change. Do you remember Jersey has a particular low tax, low spend model? Everything is about the fact that the government doesn't spend enough. That's because, of course, it can't tax capital. It's working people. It's those who actually earn income, wages. They are the ones increasingly where the burden of taxation falls. You wonder why your taxes are going up or appear to be. It's because the government is deliberate. It's a policy. Fort Regent, likewise, complete bankruptcy of their imagination of the rulers of this island. It's a beautiful fort, a monument. But they don't want to do anything with it because they can't make a profit out of it. They can't see how they could knock it down and sell it to Dandara and build luxury homes for investors. What we need is investment in that fort. I was looking from the hospital up here, across from number 3 to number 1. And what do we see? 2 abandoned monuments. It's abandoned because that is the attitude of this government. If it doesn't make any money, well, we'll just forget about it. We can't forget about Fort Regent. It is an important historical object and it should be protected.
Thank you very much. Andrea.
Right, in relation to your query about how we're going to look at our taxation system, who's going to pay for things, the government has actually launched a consultation exercise for tax review. And while it's driven for the need to address the archaic features of our existing system, the consultation is going to involve a much more broader review of our personal tax system as well. So before I can kind of comment further on the taxation system, I'd like to see the outcome of that consultation. But one of the ways that we can actually look to find alternative people to contribute to the tax is the 11K residents. They currently only pay 1% on tax, so I believe there's some wiggle room there. But still obviously making it attractive for the 11K residents to come to Jersey. And in relation to 010, it's unfortunately it's a necessary evil for the finance industry, but we should be looking at the possibility of collectively increasing the bank's reduced 10% rate to a slightly higher rate, so that's a potential to look at from a taxation point of view. We need to diversify our economy as well. There's so many ways we can do that with the regeneration of St Helier, supporting the retail industry, the digital sector, which many people have obviously touched on here, renewable energy enterprises, eco-tourism, sports tourism, the hemp farming that we have. Moving to Fort Regent, I grew up there. That was my stomping ground, and it was probably one of the best places to be in the 80s. Everybody converged there. It was such a fantastic community hub. It was the heart of St Helier. And it's shameful the government's removed the maintenance of the property portfolio from the budget many years ago, which is a result of the situation. So what we now need to do is we probably will need to look at private-public collaboration. But there's so much we can do with that Fort region, and I think, again, it should be on a consultation basis with the community so that we can come together to find out how we can utilise the Fort region and how we can see its future.
Thank you very much. Ant.
What do you wish to do about Fort Regent? I agree entirely with Senator Steve Pallett. Ministers have not treated this as a priority despite saying that they would, and have not put nearly enough effort into resolving this. The fact that the Fort Regent swimming pool is still standing all of these years later is the clearest possible evidence that they do not care. It is not good enough. If part of the site must be sold to get the capital to redevelop the rest, then let's get on with it, not put up with more years of delay, and an even more expensive bill at the end. Who is going to pay the tax and cover the cost of the aging population? I am sorry, I don't have an immediate answer, but will consider this important matter, and publish my response on my website. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attendance this evening, and thank you to all the candidates. I wish you a good evening and hope the rain has stopped. Thank you for coming.